Our next speaker is someone who has inspired many people with her devotion to her community and the amazing work that she does as president and CEO of IDACORP and Idaho Power. I have the pleasure of sitting down with her in a conversation-style interview this afternoon, but before I welcome her to the stage, let me tell you a little bit about Lisa Grow. Lisa has dedicated her entire 37-year career to Idaho Power. She earned an engineering degree from the University of Idaho and had plans to do big things in the Silicon Valley, but a college internship, you hear that, students out there? A college internship with Idaho Power brought her to her senses, and she decided to stay true to her Idaho roots, and she joined the company immediately after graduation. She was Idaho Power's second female engineer and is their first female CEO. Lisa is a self-professed tinkerer and fixer. She never stops asking why things work the way they do and how can we make these things better. One of her biggest goals outside running the company, but central to it, is to encourage and support our next generation of problem solvers. As an engineer herself, she's a strong advocate for STEM education and believes it's essential to grow Idaho's STEM workforce and support our state's economic prosperity. Lisa's a trusted leader at Idaho Power, and of the 2,100 employees of the company, many of whom have worked alongside her for decades. They know her well and value Lisa for her courage, compassion, humility, and not to mention her fantastic Halloween costumes. So I can't wait to hear what's on tap for this year. In addition, Lisa spends her valuable time engaging in causes that support the health and well-being of our communities. She's on St. Luke's Health System Board of Directors and has served many other organizations, including the Women's and Children's Alliance, Our Path Home, and the City of Boise's Economic Recovery Task Force. Lisa's an avid reader and a bit of a podcast junkie, so we'll have to get some recommendations. She loves skiing, gardening, and cappuccinos with a sprinkle of cinnamon. Doesn't get more fall than that. She's married to a retired firefighter paramedic and is the proud mother of 2 adult daughters who also work in healthcare. Lisa shares a love of travel with her family, and together they seek out adventures that take them all over the world. Following our discussion, we'll be accepting questions from the audience. And as you know, there are cards on your table. Please ask one of our volunteers if your tables run out of question cards, because we want to get those questions from you up here after this conversation. So without further delay, please welcome Lisa Grow to the stage.
Thank you. That was very kind. Okay, wow, look at everybody. So great. I see a lot of friendly faces out there. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. We're so glad to have you here. So, Lisa, I think it would be useful if you shared a little bit about your career path from starting intern and engineer to the CEO of the company so powerful they named a state after it, right?
Yes, yes.
So can you share any significant or pivotal moments in your career path?
Well, can I go back just a little bit further? There was a few things in my intro that I want to sort of double down on because, you know, CEOs are regular people and they have experiences that are very formative, you know, as we go through, just like everybody. So, you know, my tinkering and my wondering and my love of figuring out how things work, I would say came from my grandfathers. One was a lineman at Idaho Power, and one was a mechanic. So they always had tools, and they were always fixing things, and so I loved to be in their shops and trying to figure out, you know, what they were up to. So I think some of that got instilled when I was really, really young. And then in junior high school, I remember a guidance counselor named Dr. Jan Goodmanson. He pulled me aside one day in the hallway, and he was like, they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just kind of hoping I get asked to the dance. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. But he said, you know, you are really good at math and science. And so have you ever thought about engineering? Because as a woman, you could work in any industry and go anywhere in the world and make really good money. And that little seed got planted because all of that sounded pretty good. So I'm like, sure, I'll do that. So I really started taking all of the college prep classes that I could, and I just sort of fell in love with learning, and again, with a heavy emphasis on science and math. So fast forward, I mentioned that my grandfather was a lineman. So he died when I was 7 years old, but he had had an almost 40-year career at Idaho Power. And so for me, when I would go and visit him, I thought it was where grandpas worked, right? And so I did not see myself as that. And I remember one of my friend's moms worked at Idaho Power, and she said, "Oh, you're studying engineering. You should work for Idaho Power." And I said these words, "Oh, no, I'm going to Silicon Valley," because back in the late 80s is when it was just starting to get going, and PCs were a new thing. I know for all you young people, you're like, what? Yeah, okay. But it's true, they didn't always exist. And so I thought, well, Idaho Power is nothing but old men and dusty equipment, and that's what I said. I'm like, I don't see that would be a thing that I would want to do. And that's when the universe intervenes, when you say, I will never. And so this internship came up, and I thought, or not internship, actually, it was a design project for our senior capstone project, and it was team-based. And that was really why I wanted to do it, because I'd spent enough time in the labs by myself. I thought, this sounds like more fun to be on a team. And so that's what really drew me to that, and then the rest is history. So all of these learnings and these opportunities that sort of show up, that someone might suggest something to you, or there's this opportunity to go try something, that I think is where a lot of my career success has come from. And so then in Idaho Power, this is my 15th job that I've had. Most of the work that I've done has been, a variety, mostly in engineering roles before I went into leadership, maybe, 10, 15 years into my career. So I really built a reputation on getting stuff done. I loved learning. I loved the technology. I, again, was really, really focused on getting stuff done. And then one day, we didn't really call them mentors back then, but there was a lot of people that sort of took me under their wing. And this man that I just dearly loved took me aside and said, Lisa, there's really nobody better technically, and you really know how to get stuff done, but you need to change your personality.
Ouch.
I was like, thank you? I don't know how to do that. And so he said, well, it's just that you really are so focused on getting the job done that you're not noticing the people that you're steamrolling as you're doing it. And that's not going to help you in the long run. They might get the work done for that project, but you need to invest just as much care and concern for the people that you're working with so that they'll want to follow you in the future. And I had to go home and process that. That was ouchy in the moment. But the more I thought about it, he was so right. And so that kind of set me on a course to really explore what is that intensity that people are feeling from me, and how can I make that more, impactful in the way that we form a team and we get the work done and we're all really proud of it. And so I made intentional efforts to build the teams that everyone wanted to be on because we were successful and we were doing fun stuff. But that they also felt that their own development, and they felt appreciated, and they felt like they were, again, I think we all want to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves. So I think the other thing was I was very much driven by my curiosity. So some of the jobs that I was in, it was only like a year, and I would go, it's probably not the best fit for me. But I learned a lot. I mean, I always use system planning as my example. These guys and gals are just wickedly smart, but they like to run models, and they sit in their cubicles and they run models, and they're so focused on that. They didn't talk all day, and so I just realized I was just like, I don't know if this is a good fit for me. And so, but I know I have great relationships with them to this day. Some of them are still there, and so the networks that you build over time, I think also help, and you know who to call. So I couldn't run the studies like they do, but I can say, hey, tell me what would happen if we lost this piece of the system, or tell me what would happen under these circumstances, and they can do that. So, so yeah, I think it's about building those relationships, really, being able to take the hard lessons that you learn from people that care about you, and those are, I think, those were the moments that I feel like were real turning points, and without them, I just don't think I would get to where I am.
Thank you so much for that. So are there, after you changed your personality,
right.
then?
No, I think I'm still the same personality. I'm just nicer, I guess.
You became the Lisa A+. What other values, or were there specific principles that now guide your leadership style that you've put into place proactively?
Yeah, I think one of the most important qualities about leadership is love. I think you have to love the people that you work with, like genuinely care about them. And in my case, at Idaho Power, we deal with one of the world's most dangerous products. And so I never take that for granted, because we are asking people to do things that are incredibly dangerous. And if you don't care about them, you're not going to put in the right processes and tools and safety culture. And so I think, much like parenting, it's like you want to see them grow, you want to push them, you want to help them grow as individuals also. So there is that. I think curiosity is another one. I mentioned that as part of my career, just wondering about, how does this work? What do these folks do? How does this all fit together? And as I ascended in the company, you obviously get a broader view of what's going on. And so being really curious about how things work, how we can make them better. We'll talk more about just our industry and company in a minute, but we're going through just extraordinary times. And so without curiosity, I think, it would just feel like a tidal wave crashing over you with all the work that we have in front of us. So I think that is incredibly important. And then, the other thing that I would say that where I'm focused all the time is our mission. And that is to provide safe, reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean energy, electricity to all of you. And it's in that order. So we've got to make sure safety first. We've got to make sure that it's reliable. And we've got to make sure it's affordable. But if it's cheap but not very reliable, nobody cares how cheap it is, right? So we're always, trying to make sure that we're balancing that in every decision that we make.
You said a little bit about how you got started working for your grandpa's company, but can you say why you're still there? What are the pros and cons of a career choice that stays within the same company, the same mission, the same principles, and what advice would you give to people that are considering maybe leaving a company? What's been rewarding about staying with the same one?
Yeah, that is a great question. I get asked a lot, and it's not as rare in the utility industry. Why, I'm not exactly sure, but I suspect it's along the same lines as what has kept me there. The first thing is, I deeply care about our mission and the purpose of the company. So we serve all of you. So there is, and we get to do really, really interesting things in service of that. So there's the being aligned with the mission and the values of the company, because if you're not, you don't stay. I love the people that I work with. So I just don't think you're going to find finer people than those at Idaho Power. So I think that has kept me. I've been able to grow and develop. So if you get sort of pigeonholed, or you feel stagnant at a company and there's no place for you to go, I think you might look for something else. And then finally, they took really good care of me. I was, a kid right out of college. I got married. I became a working mother. I mean, they've helped me with every season of my life. And we have really wonderful wages and benefits. I've had supervisors that have helped me when, in those different seasons where you might need a little more flexibility here or something else. I remember I was the first to ask to work 9 9-hour days so I could take every Friday off and go and volunteer at my kids' school. And I treasured those. I mean, now it's like, again, I'm sure for some of you that have only known about, the flexibility of working from home, at least part of the time, that just didn't exist at all. The technology didn't exist, nor did the culture. So, but those kinds of things really made a difference, and they were willing to hear me out and work with me. So all of those things, I think, have kept me here for so long. Now, I think, again, any one of those that isn't present, you probably go and look and for something else. Now, what I missed, I think about, gosh, it would have been interesting to maybe work overseas or go to a different side of the country and experience something else. But there was just something about what we were doing here I've just found so satisfying that's probably why I travel a lot, is because I do love going out. It's a big world out there, and there are so many industries and so many interesting things going on. And the thing that's so great about what we do at Idaho Power, electricity in general is 2% of the GDP, but I like to point out we're the first 2%, because nothing else happens if we don't do our job, right? So, as we go about our work and we interact with all of you and all the work that you do, we learn from you. And so I get these little glimpses into all the industries that we serve. And so I feel like that sort of fulfills that curiosity. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with moving around and trying new things, but it's also wonderful if you find a place that you get to call home for your entire career. It's whatever you are looking for personally, but I felt really blessed to be able to do that.
That's wonderful. And having a safe home to come home to, but also big adventures. That's sort of one of those glories of life, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the industry then and how it's changed over those almost 4 decades that you've been working. Because even if it's the first 2%, the power industry has really big responsibilities to do the things to be reliable and affordable and all of that. So tell us a little bit about how it's changed.
Yeah. So let me talk about a few things that haven't changed. The laws of physics have not changed. and I'm pretty sure they're not going to. And no matter how many man-made laws and rules and regulation we can imagine, the laws of physics always win. So that's an important thing to remember. The other thing that I will say in southern Idaho, the competition for water also has not changed in, hundreds of years. So that remains today. And we have to be really thoughtful about how we use the water. But what has changed is about everything else, right? The fact that there's a woman CEO, I think. And the interesting thing about the utility industry, we are about 25% women. It's one of the highest percentages out of any industry that have women CEOs. So I think that speaks volumes of what has been traditionally a very male-dominated field, and it still is to some degree. But the fact that it is been welcoming and supportive of women coming into the field, I think it just continues to strengthen, and we bring that perspective in that is needed. Technology, my goodness. When I was thinking about what has changed in my career, there were times when things were done so manually. It was like you wrote it on a piece of paper, you handed it to someone who went to the typing pool and they typed it up, and then you get a piece of paper in the mail, and the amount of data that we get on a second by second basis used to be you had to call somebody and have them get in their truck and drive out and check on something. So the level of data and just the deployment of so many technologies has been, as a nerd, I love it. The more we get to learn by deploying those, the better. But then just even how our electricity is produced has changed a lot. Now, I'm happy to say, back to the water situation, we're a hydro-based utility, so about half of the power that we serve all of you with is clean by virtue of our hydro generation, and it's what helps keep our prices low. And that is relatively low. I know that is always perspective. There are certainly increased pressures on power rates, but one of the things that keeps it relatively low is our hydro base. And so we have been investing a tremendous amount in keeping those all, very. We've upgraded some of them, but we almost have rebuilt that entire fleet over the last couple of decades. But we have, we're phasing out our coal. Back in the 70s and 80s, we built coal plants. They said, oh my gosh, it was going to be too cheap to meter. This is the best thing ever. People couldn't build coal plants fast enough. And now we can't shut them down fast enough, but we have to make sure that we're balancing reliability, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So our portfolio is changing. We have hundreds of megawatts of wind, solar, and batteries that are brand new. So it's a significant part of our portfolio now, where there was zero not too long ago. So that has been changing. I think, stakeholders' expectations continue to change. The rules, the regulation, the goals of the country to become cleaner over time. Climate change has had just a significant impact, and that is a huge change. So, even as much, we can have droughts and floods in, a lot more intense and a lot more frequent, and that very much changes how much we can generate. So we've got to be thinking about how do we adapt to the changing climate. Wildfires is certainly, I don't have to tell anyone that lives in Idaho or Eastern Oregon it's been happening all over the West, but Idaho certainly, we've had a rough summer. And how we manage wildfire now is so different. And if you think about, 5 years ago when we were all watching California and saying, oh my gosh, that's terrible for them, it's here now. And so we have had to learn, you saw California, then it was Oregon, then it was Washington, then it was Texas, then it was Colorado, then it was Lahaina. So it can happen anywhere. And, it's not worth arguing about what the cause of climate change is. We're just seeing it, that we're seeing the impacts of it. So we have to make sure we adapt. How many of you were involved in the PSPS? In late July? Yeah. It's one of those things that, it's in our DNA to give you 99.9% reliability. It is really goes absolutely against our DNA to turn the power off. But the reason why we do that is we want to make sure you are all safe when conditions are met that there is risk. And about... gosh, I think I'm forgetting how it was made. 2003, 2008, the Oregon Trail fire. Sorry, I'm blanking on the date now. 2008. I was the vice president of engineering and construction at the time. And for those of you that may not remember, as fire originated on our system, there were 60-mile-an-hour winds. That fire moved 3 miles in the matter of seconds. And it burned down 10 houses, and actually it was a Boise State University professor died in that fire, and there were many homes that were damaged. So I stood with my then CEO, Lamont Keene, and we stood in front of all of you, and we said, whatever we did or didn't do, we're going to make it right. So the PSPS is that promise to you, that we're going to make sure our system is safe, and we will turn off the power. I get it. I so get it that it is inconvenient. Totally get it. But we are doing what we can to make sure we can give you the notice that it may need to be done, and that we're deploying technologies that will make it faster in how quickly. We have to go and patrol every inch of that line once we turn it off, because the storm has hit and we don't know what is in that line. And as a matter of fact, we found a tree in the line that I am sure would have started a fire had we not done that. So in many ways, because there was no fire, it was a success. But people get confused and say, well, there was no fire, why did you turn the power off? And so it's just a learning experience that we're going to get better with every one of those. We hope it is the last of the tools we want to use, But it is part of what is changing, and how important it is that we are staying ahead of these issues so that we can continue to provide you safe, reliable, affordable, clean energy as we go through time. So again, for all of you that were impacted, I do apologize for the inconvenience, but again, I'd rather have you mad at us for a little bit than what can happen. And I want you to know, too, that we work around the clock, literally, to make sure that we're getting the fuels, away from the lines. We have great partners in a variety. We have a lot of public land partners. We are, again, deploying technology so we can detect things, cameras, using AI. I mean, we are putting, it's an all-hands-on-deck effort to really make sure that we're doing everything we can. So I don't want you to fear, our system is not, putting you at risk, because we're doing everything we can, but we don't control Mother Nature. So we got to make sure that we're being mindful of what the conditions are. And when there's a lot of fuels, it's hot, and the winds are blowing, and a storm's coming through, that's when you will more than likely see it. So lots has changed, and we have had to continue to adapt to it. So yeah, it seems like, and even as I say that today, next month I may have another list. It's moving fast.
It is moving fast, and the ways that you plan for the future in this context seem to be developing as it happens as well. But I'm curious if you could reflect a little bit on how this tremendous transition that's happening in the energy industry gives you an opportunity to connect with new generations of power consumers, and also maybe the ways that significant growth in a place like Idaho has also shaped the context of demand and the challenges of providing that safe and reliable and affordable energy.
Yeah, it's such a great question, because you may know it, but we are one of the fastest growing states, and therefore one of the fastest growing utilities in the nation by percentage. So right now we're looking at about 7.7% annual growth for the next 5 years. Now, that is heavily weighted towards commercial and industrial. The Meta data center out in Kuna, Micron's awesome expansion out in at their site is many hundreds of megawatts, and we're really excited to be able to serve them. But there's also still lots of people coming. And so just, residential is there really isn't one of our business or one of our customer classes that isn't growing. But so we have to really be thoughtful. We don't overbuild the system by thousands of megawatts. No one would, I can't imagine us going to the PUC and going, well, we think, in 10 years, this might happen, so let us build it now. So we have to make sure we understand who's coming, how many megawatts they need, and then look out and say, well, how long is it going to take to build it? Right now, the AI boom is really causing system planning, utility planning, to do things much differently. We look out every 2 years, we go and look 20 years out and try to predict, what we think we're going to need. And it's based on least cost and least risk. So, when these big giant loads come in, that is a very different construct. Now, we have a construct around growth in Idaho that growth pays for growth. So when Micron is building their fab, the costs that are directly for their benefit, they have to pay. So it doesn't get put into your rates. But to the extent that some of the things that they're doing actually does provide benefit to the system as a whole, that's more socialized. But it's heavily weighted on them paying their way. And I think that's one of the ways we keep it affordable. But having said all that, we are building a 15-acre substation, one of our largest, probably will be the largest when it's all said and done, aptly named the CHIP substation. If you're flying over that end of Boise, you can see it. It's remarkable. So making sure supply chain and really figuring out how do these customers want to be served. Some, with Micron and Meta, we built a solar facility for them, and they pay a premium to be able to be served with solar power. So we have products that we can offer, but then permitting becomes such a bottleneck. I get it that people may not want those kinds of facilities near their home. I totally understand it, and we work really closely with communities, elected officials, agencies, and then the neighborhoods themselves, and really try to find solutions for everyone's benefit. But it's getting really hard. Even things that, like the Lava Ridge wind farm, for example, we are not part of that. I know there's been some news stories that might suggest we are. We are not. And that is getting challenged and may never actually get built. There was a solar facility over in Kuna that was not permitted in Ada County, and that was actually one that had won an RFP we had out on the street, and so that may not get built. And we've been trying to build a transmission line to Central Oregon for what we like to, our Adam Richens, many of you may know him, he's awesome, he's our COO. He's pointed out that if B2H was a child, it would now be old enough to vote. It's taken 18 years to get to this point, and we still are not building it. By the time we turn dirt, it will probably be old enough to drink. And so we cannot have a clean energy transition without transmission, because most of the places where it will be produced, whatever it is, whether it is a hydrogen-fueled plant or a small modular reactor, or some of these really interesting things that are getting developed as we speak, they're probably not going to be right next door to your house. So you're going to need to transport it. Back to the laws of physics, they don't just get beamed in magically. So we've got to make sure we can put the wires up and do it in a timely way so that we can serve the load when the customers want to be served. And the thing that I would highlight too, our business model, we are a regulated monopoly, right? Now, some may think, oh, monopoly is just bad. That just sounds bad. We want choice. What we trade for being a regulated monopoly, we are regulated. Like, we have to go and prove to the PUC and all our customers that the things that we've done and the money that we have spent is in your interest. And we don't get recovery if we can't prove that. And so in trade, we have a franchise area where we serve customers, because it's not, we are such a capital intensive industry that it would not make sense to have competitors building competitive transmission lines, for example. They're hard enough to cite when you are the regulated utility. And the way that all kind of works out into society is that what we don't have is energy poverty. We don't have areas that are not served by electricity that want it. And if you think about if it was just all free market, you absolutely would have areas that are not economic to serve that would not get served. And so we work really hard to make sure that the way that we are conducting business is in service of all of the communities where we have that obligation to serve. So all the things we do mean that somebody needs us to provide service, and all of the planning, all of the things we do delivers it when they need it, where they need it. And that doesn't just happen by magic. It is a regulatory construct that has worked for over 100 years, and it's one that I think should be defended for that reason, because in the end, I do think that it is the best way to serve everyone at the most safe, reliable, affordable way.
Thank you so much for that reflection on all the complicated facets of transmission and siting, but also the sort of regulatory piece that supports that work, and the equitable role that it plays in a state like Idaho, where serving rural communities would not be feasible if there were competing transmission lines, for example. I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about other aspects of Idaho Power and the electricity delivery process that our audience should understand, and how maybe that's changed in your career as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I found fascinating about Idaho Power is that we have one of the largest in-house environmental practices. Most utilities farm that out to consultants. And we have, biologists and archaeologists and meteorologists and hydrologists and a lot of ologists that are really caring for the ecosystem in which we have the privilege to serve. And we do everything we can. We follow the science, and we do everything we can to improve the environment where we exist. So, learning about we have great information on the website, but wait, I feel like my microphone is going in and out. Are you hearing that? Yeah. Okay.
Talk through it.
Okay, I'm trying. All right. I don't know if it's smashed against my face. Okay. All right. I just thought, oh, I'm hearing voices in my head. Yeah. So, we have some amazing programs with like sturgeon. How we care for the sturgeon, the population in the Snake River is just remarkable. If you ever get a chance to go out there and work with the biologist and go on a boat ride, we do have some of the coolest equipment, I will tell you that. But so we have a raptor program where we really have studied how raptors interact with our power lines, and we've built, designed the structure so that they're in the areas where raptors exist, the insulators are put further apart, so when they take off and they spread their wings, they won't touch the wires, which is a common cause of fatality if they're designed differently. So things like that. Water quality. We have several fish hatcheries that we actually are run by Idaho Fish and Game, but we have great partnerships in that. We are, always trying to find ways to lessen the impact that we have on our facilities, as well as opportunities for people to enjoy them. So how many of you camped at one of our campgrounds or gone to one of our parks? Or they are such an amazing amenity, and if you like to get outdoors, it's just, I welcome you to come to one of our parks. There are dozens of them up and down the Snake River. So, as an amenity, I guess, of us having those hydro facilities. We also have some great museums. Swan Falls Museum is now open so that you can go down there and kind of learn about. That was the very first dam that Idaho Power had. It was actually built by a mining and milling company in the early 1900s, but when we formed in 1916, that was the first dam that we bought. So, such a storied history and things that people might not associate with a power company, but the environmental practice is something that we're really, really proud of. And I think the other thing that I would mention is the EMS, the energy management system, is like the brain of the utility. That's how the grid is operated from a remote location, where we used to have people out in all of our generation facilities around the clock. Now it's all run from one location. And so that's great, but then you have to think about, and you don't have to look any further than Ukraine to know that our grid is a very rich target for state actors, and we get millions of hits a month to trying to find a way in so that they can wreak havoc on our system. So that is, those are things we never even talked about back in the day. So, and I will also say there have become more and more threats from inside the United States on the grid as well. Some of you may recall, I believe it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, where somebody got up in the middle of the night from the Treasure Valley and drove down to Hell's Canyon and shot up several of our breakers. And that was pretty scary, actually, and still not sure we understand the motive, but those are the kinds of things that we now have to put into our thinking and our planning, and it goes into your rates where we have to protect it from lots of both physical and cyber attacks, and that was never anything that we've had to deal with before.
So thinking about your personal journey in the company and the way the power industry has also evolved, I'm curious, where you go from CEO, right? You sort of made it all the way to the top, but do you have aspirations for a next phase of your career, or are there things, some of these changes that are happening that inspire you to think about what you'll do next?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I get asked that a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, you've been here forever. When are you leaving? I'm like,
No, that wasn't it.
no, I'm kidding. Yeah, that wasn't how you ask it. It's how it gets asked. But you know, I've always said that I think, you know, that scene at the end of Mary Poppins when she just knows the winds have shifted and it's time for you to go. I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen for me. I have a list of things that I really want to make sure I see to the end, to make sure that the team that will follow me is set up for success. And it's not that I think I'm the only one that can do it. It's just a commitment that I have made to them and to me to see it through. But you know, I think there's a lot of work in the community I'd love to participate in. I'd love to travel some more. I have a grandson, so I got a big promotion a year ago, and so I'd love to be able to spend more time with him. It's one of those things that you just can't imagine how fast it comes. Like 37 years, it feels like a minute. And there isn't anything that I'm so proud of what I've been able to achieve, and so proud of the work that Idaho Power has been able to achieve. I certainly don't think I want another career. I will say that. I think there's time to rest. But I don't know. I may be thinking about maybe serving on some boards or just finding a way to give back. Because at the end of the day, the work that I've been able to do with different community groups. I'm on the Federal Reserve, which is a really fascinating time right now. Woo, talk about a roller coaster ride. So those opportunities to continue to learn and grow, I don't know if I can ever not keep learning. So, I keep thinking, maybe I'll learn a language, which my friends that are bilingual or multilingual, they're like, yeah, you kind of missed your window. Yeah. So I don't know. Well, maybe I'll have more time, but so I just think continuing to just look for those opportunities as they come up, and keep exploring. I think there's a lot of the world I have yet to see, so I can imagine doing some of that. So we'll see.
That's wonderful. Our speaker yesterday, Joan Mooney, talked about having a fund to take her grandson places, right? To have him travel with her. So I think that
is a great idea. Okay, I'm going to have to steal that.
Multi-generationally sort of investing that. And I know a number of boards that would love to have you and your experience and wealth of knowledge. So we talked a little bit about before your love for reading and for podcast. What's on your nightstand right now, and what are you listening to that you're enjoying?
Well, on my nightstand, I am just finishing The Great Circle. And it's a story. Have you read that?
I loved
that book. Right? My poor husband, I'm like, don't talk to me, I'm reading. I got to get through this part. It's so good. And in fact, we have a group over here that's sort of our informal book club, Idaho Power people over here. So one of the podcasts that I'm listening to that I just love is Julia Louis-Dreyfus and her Wiser Than Me. How many have listened? It's so good. It is so good. And she's funny, and she interviews these women that are, in their 70s, 80s, 90s, because she points out that that older women often get sort of ignored as we age, and yet there's this lived experience and so much wisdom. And so she interviews women from all different aspects of life, but all very well known and well accomplished. And so I just really, really enjoyed that a lot. And then of course I am everything Brene Brown. Any other fans in here? Yeah, right? Yeah. Woo! I actually got to hear her speak this year in Austin, Texas, and she's everything that you would think. She's amazing. But I love all of her podcasts. She's Dare to Lead and Unlocking Us, and she was talking about she took a year off of social media, and she was like, this is a really hard season for her. And she's talking about how we're all living beyond human scale. What's how change is happening so fast. We are living really beyond what humans can process and do, and it has all kinds of implications. And so I think the more that we really are thoughtful about that, it's AI, and that's going to change the world, and it is. And but what does that mean to us? How are we going to process all this if we're moving beyond our ability to process it? So I highly recommend her latest series on both of those podcasts. Sometimes she does a little crossover. She has some really thoughtful people that are talking about exactly that, both the psychology, the practicality, Amy Webb's was one that really stuck with me. She's a futurist, and she was really, it was well worth the investment of your time. So those are the ones that come to mind. But man, I love a good fiction. I love a good mystery. I love,
Those are fantastic. Thank you. This is the time where I can take your questions up here. So if you have one, hold it up, and the volunteers will come around and pick those up, and I will look through them and try and get as many of them as I can. But I really appreciated, Lisa, how you talked a little bit about how they'll find you. The blue shirts will find you. They will come around. This time that we're living in right now is such a historically rapid moment. And one of the things I tell my students in my history classes is that, not since Gutenberg's printing press or the encounter where the world became whole and Columbus arrived in the Americas has generational life happen so quickly, right?
Yeah.
And we're living through one of those pivotal times, and the way that's transforming how we experience life is a really exciting and also really sort of terrifying time to be alive because of the rapidness of the change. So one of the questions here has to do more with going deep into a specific role or being sort of a broad-ranging learner. And you talked a little bit about both, but can you say a little bit more about what helps you climb the leadership ladder, depth or breadth?
That's very situational. So it sort of depends on the organization. And it, I think, also really is dictated by what you want. For Idaho Power, because it's such a big, complex organization, you really need to understand the big, complex organization, and you best learn it by going and doing different things. But we do have people that have wanted to just go really deep in their organization, and so they become more of a technical lead than necessarily, a C-suite leader, although that's not completely out of the question. Some of it comes with sort of timing and luck, in that you want to make sure if you're going really deep, see who's ahead of you, and if they're about your same age, or you want to kind of do the math on, well, maybe if the more breadth I have, the more opportunities I might have for other leadership advancing. Because it's true, in any organization, the higher you go, the fewer positions there are. And so you want to be sort of strategic, I guess, about where you invest in your development. But I'm not going to sit here and say that one is better than the other. Again, it needs to align with your personal interests and goals, and then be thoughtful about how the organization, how it's constructed, and be mindful or thoughtful. Talk with your mentors and your leaders to help get their help in sort of seeing where those opportunities might be. But I just love learning, and so for me, I would go deep on something, and then I would go, okay, well, got it. Now how can I deploy that in another way? And so I was just sort of driven by that. Maybe I can't keep a job, maybe, I don't know, but it just the way it kind of stitched together, and then I really had this really deep understanding of all the complexity of our system, I think, or of our organization and our system, I think helped me a lot although I never actually thought I would ever be a CEO. I was super happy being an engineer. And honestly, there's some days where I'm like, what was wrong with, working the grid? Because it gets a lot more complex and politics and all the things that come at you the higher you go. But yeah, I think hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, that's a great one. There's a lot of questions in here sort of around climate and climate neutrality, or carbon neutrality. So I'm going to sort of bridge a couple of them in there, and we'll go that direction for a couple minutes. But two people want to thank you for the parking at Swan Falls Dam.
So welcome.
Thank you for being a community partner on that. But the follow-up questions have to do with, do you think Idaho Power will be carbon neutral by 2045? And if so, how? And what's your personal view of the responsibility of a CEO to positively impact the climate?
Such great questions. So again, I go back to safe, reliable, affordable, clean. If you remember nothing else that I've said today, please remember that. And because we are hydro-based, and we are, the moves that we are making right now, we will be about 80% clean by 2030. And part of that has been, again, taking good care of our hydro facilities. Yeah, thank you. So part of it is based in our hydro facilities, and that's why we fight so hard on the water issues. And we do that in service of you. We have deployed, again, in total, thousands of megawatts of wind, solar, and batteries. That works great in the summer. It does not work great in the winter. So, we were planning to just shut down all of our coal units, and we realized because of the growth, we couldn't take that generation offline because that's what serves when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And batteries only last for 4 hours. And if for those of you, in the Idaho winters, those are short days and we can get inversions that will set up for weeks. That set of our portfolio isn't going to cut it. So we are converting all of our coal to gas. In fact, in the process of doing that right now. So that cuts the carbon in half. So if you think about a trajectory, that's a huge decline in carbon, even though it's still a fossil fuel. And the thing that I think we all have to wrap our minds around is there's no path to clean that doesn't have gas in everyone's portfolio across the United States for a while. Now, there's technologies like carbon capture that are still not commercially viable, but are possible. And there's a ton of work, the IIJA and the IRA, the funding that's going into that will help figure that out. So I'm excited about that. And then, of course, I'm very bullish on hydrogen. We're still a little ways out on making that cost competitive, but you think about, we have all the facilities that burn gas, just burning hydrogen instead reuses a lot of things that we've already invested in. Small modular reactors, I think, are going to be absolutely key to this future, but we've probably got a decade before that's viable. And so we have to be patient and make sure that we don't make bad investments because these are very expensive, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So we want to make sure that they are ready for prime time. And really, hydrogen and SMRs is kind of what I believe will get us to that last 20%. And so I think it is very much doable. But again, as Adam Richens liked to point out, if we get 90% there, I mean, your students would be pretty happy with a 90, I would think, So getting an A, yeah. I'm going to be good with that. Because the only reason we won't get to 2020 or carbon neutral by 2045 is because the technology doesn't exist. I won't consider that a failure. We are working hard at a national, state, INL. What a awesome partner that we have in this state that is helping us figure all of this out. So we have great partners, and we are committed to doing it, but it has to be safe, reliable, and affordable first. You cannot break those to get to clean.
So we had a question here about safety, because you mentioned loving your employees and that being one of your principal values, and line persons have an increased risk of exposure in the work that they do, and also the sort of cascading effects of depression or PTSD from some of those traumatic events. Do you have trainings for those individuals, and what does Idaho Power do to correspondingly support the success of those employees?
Gosh, what a great question. Okay, I love that, and it wasn't a plant. I thank you for asking it. So, safety is an absolute core value of Idaho Power. I come to almost if I'm in town, every new employee orientation and tell them from me, there is no work that is more important than them going home safely to their families every single night. No work at all. Stop the work. So yes, there is, especially the line workers are out there in inclement weather. They are often up in poles. They're doing all kinds of things that mere mortals I don't know could do, and so we teach them from day one about how to do things safely. We invest in the tools. We invest in everything that can keep them safe. And we've been working on our safety culture. We track things for OSHA for sure, and that's important. But we've really been dialing in on high energy control assessments, HECA. And we call it the capacity model. So we're really scanning the environment that we're going to go to work in, and we're asking ourselves, what is the stuff that can kill us? And then how do we remove that from the environment so that everybody is out of the bite? So if a mistake happens, nobody gets hurt. And it's important that we make that, we're humans, right? We're going to make mistakes. We just can't help it. But we can make sure that when a mistake happens, nobody gets hurt as a result. And we have had, in spite of all the things that we've been doing, we've had the 3 safest years we've had in the company's history in the last 4 years. So it is, I think, showing that that investment is paying off. But a lot of it is giving permission. I tell them, and not just me, but our culture tells them, if you don't feel safe, stop the work. Sometimes they just need, a little better understanding or, a technique or whatever it is that there's a conversation. Sometimes they're pointing out that it's not safe. It's very common, that humans, you can have drift. You can, take a shortcut. You can do it, I'm just going to speed up. Or maybe this isn't important this time. We really are trying to drive that out of the way that we do our work. And so, It also is important that we make sure, I talked about wildfire, but when car pole accidents, for example, those can create, great danger to our communities, to our first responders, to the people that were in the car. So there's things like that we put into how we respond as well. Now, your point about the impact to the individuals, we drive, is it 10 million miles? Is that right? Something like that, on 11 million miles a year, our folks are out there. So we encounter a lot of things that have nothing to do with the system itself, but it's on the roads and things that they notice and things that they respond to, some of which are just tragic. And so we have people that are trained in traumatic response, so that when someone has been exposed to something like that, either there are some that are, safety professionals that are the ones that would be called out. Sometimes it's just people that happen upon. And so we make sure we connect those people, get them the resources they need, help them process that so that it doesn't get stuck, and that they're being, able to process it in a healthy way. Because it is, some of it is really, I think of my husband, firefighter, paramedic, who still kind of deals with his own version of that, having that kind of constant, exposure to really tragic things is hard.
Absolutely. Lisa, you've had such an inspirational career and shared so much with us today. I have approximately 300 other questions that I wish we had the rest of the afternoon to talk about. But please join me in thanking Lisa for sharing her story with us.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure.